Good afternoon. My name is Amy LeDuc. I'm the Foundation Manager at St. Joseph's Art Society, and I'd like to welcome you all here to St. Joseph's. The building there was originally a church here in the 1860s that was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake, and then this building, as we know it, was built in 1913. Believe it or not, when it was built, it was the largest Catholic church west of the Mississippi. And from that, a thriving Roman Catholic parish emerged. And it was mostly an Irish parish for many years, and then eventually became the largest Filipino Catholic parish in the country. During that time in the 80s, the building was also declared a National Historic Landmark, Landmark 120. And so it had a wonderful life for decades here in the western part of Soma. During the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, the building was not destroyed, but it was damaged. The Archdiocese of the Catholic Church decided to deconsecrate not just this building, but many of the large churches in the area. Through a series of unfortunate incidents, the building actually ended up being abandoned and was completely abandoned for decades, almost 30 years. And it was becoming a real tragedy for the city that this building was here dormant. A few years ago, a group of developers were planning to create a tech co-working space here. But by the time designer Ken Folk got involved, he likes to tell the story that he walked in and pigeons were going everywhere. There was a huge hole in the roof and there was water dripping down the sides. It was really had fallen into horrible disrepair. But Ken thought that at one time he would bring over his entire design team. They have a studio on Folsom and 7th Street, and that the entire studio would come over here and start working. Well, in the process of the restoration, that was, because it's a National Historic Landmark, was going back to the most exact and premium standards. He started to see the plaster coming back onto the walls, which was done by a group of Irish plasterers who moved here to San Francisco for a year, and he started to see the mezzanine and all of the components of the restoration come together, and he realized that this isn't a private space, but really a gift to the city. And so from that, the idea of the society was born. And Ken really wanted to bring together like-minded people where art of all kinds, visual art, performing arts, music, dance, wine, food, fashion, conversation, that it could all really come together where people could have these really elevated and immersive experiences. So he started with a small group of people in his creative community, and from that it's grown and grown. We invite people here all across the cultural community, and we have lectures, we have concerts, we've had Audra McDonald here, we've had Paula West here, we've had multiple different performers. We've had incredible artwork from JR and just a ton of local and regional amazing emerging artists here as well. We've had book signings, and we've had Dolce & Gabbana, and we've had it really runs the gamut, and it's just an incredible collection of creative and imaginative events and people coming together here. So throughout the space, you can see not only incredible art shows that are here. One of our partners that's located here on the mezzanine level, Carpenter's Workshop Gallery. They're an independent partner. They represent their own artists and curate their own shows, but we're incredibly collaborative with them. They have some amazing pieces up on the mezzanine now, as well as pieces here that we curate shows about on a quarterly level. We also have underneath our mezzanine 8 wonderful salons where people can one day again gather for a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and some great conversation. An interesting fact is a lot of people assume that many of these pieces were here and were sort of rescued from the church, but the church had actually removed almost all of the furniture and the objects. So these are things that Ken's sourced and collected over time. The top of the bar is actually, and Brittany and Elizabeth can give you more details, but it's actually reclaimed foundation slabs, and really beautiful. We also had a metal worker design all of these railings. So the entire mezzanine, it added 9,000 square feet to the space, and it solved so many incredible challenges to the space. We're able to put our emergency lights and alarms on this. Again, being able to create the salons down below, having this great aerial view, still protecting the open space. I just think it was just an incredibly thoughtful addition. You know, you would think putting a bridge across here would cut everything off, but if anything, it sort of opens it up even more. So the bears are, they're a part of a couple of bodies of work that a Dutch duo, Jaap Sinky and Ferry van Tongeren, created and installed here in this space for the opening. These Jaap and Ferry credit Charles Darwin as their third partner, so their sort of moniker is Darwin, Sinky, and Van Tongeren. And they had a very successful marketing and advertising business in Amsterdam and sold the business and dedicated their lives to fine art taxidermy. Okay. They studied with some of the masters in European museums and really just became, as you can see, just incredibly masterful at the craft. The bears, believe it or not, were proposed whole cloth. So these platforms are part of the installation. It wasn't like there were platforms here when it was a Catholic church and there were saints or statues on them. They envisioned these platforms and these bears as well. And it was inspired by, over at the studio, an old object that Ken has in the studio, and it's a bear with a target on it that kids would use sort of at like day camps and things like that to shoot. So they saw that bear, and then the California bear, and bear country that we're in here in the western part of Soma. And so here they are, and they are actually paper mache forms. And so in the practice of fine art taxidermy, you would make these unique forms, and each is unique, that you would then stretch hide or hair over to complete the taxidermy process. So these bears are here. They created these banners for us with their moniker, Darwin, Sinky, Van Tongeren, and then our snake moniker, which is sort of part of our own identity as St. Joseph's.
Any reason for the choice of a bear versus other animals? Is it because of California? Or?
I think it's California. I think they were inspired by seeing that bear in Ken's studio. I think, like I said, we're in sort of the leather community part of Soma, with bears, and so I think there's a lot of different ways that you can play on the concept of bears. They have an incredibly cheeky, dark sense of humor, and so it's a lot of fun. So although they are sort of these imposing bears, we also find them to be very loving and lighthearted. They're the angels above watching over us, and we just simply can't imagine the space without them at this point. We do actually have some examples of the original glass here. We actually have two styles that are still here. So you can see the difference. There is sort of the opaque glass here in the transept windows and some of the others, and then some of this clearer windows. That's the historical sort of window. So these clear windows were something that were added. This is something really to behold, and I think Vahid and I could probably talk for hours about what it took to get this artwork installed. This whole top piece had to be added and installed, and it really wasn't, talk about an engineering marvel to get this installed. And so Vahid worked directly with Carpenter's Workshop and the artist group Drift, also based in Amsterdam, to create this very special piece. It is called Flylight, And as you can see, perhaps you're noticing it's difficult when it's so bright out. The algorithm was developed in a partnership with Intel for a Burning Man project that drifted a few years ago, and then they've sort of transferred into this. And it's also exciting because this work is somewhat modular, so it can be installed in somebody's home or in a hotel, or of course what we're hoping for is a museum piece. So we have 3 bathrooms up here, and then this actually was one of the altars of the church that we rehabilitated and made into the sinks here, which is great.
Anybody here know what kind of marble, where the marble is from?
Oh, I'd have to, that again, unfortunately that's an Elizabeth and Brittany question. So Carpenters changes their shows out about quarterly.
Okay.
They're a gallery that started in London, and then they have a 90,000 square foot studio complex just right outside of Paris. They have space in New York, and then this was their first West Coast outpost. This is bronze, if you can believe it. It's a working sort of sideboard cabinet, but you can see it's sort of upended. It's upside down, as if sort of a tornado took it away and pulled the elements apart. We'll be going up to the choir loft, which is actually my favorite spot in the entire church. And I think Vahid can probably talk a little bit more about the development of this staircase. One of the things too that I think the rest of the group can really speak to is how the towers are now opened up, which if I'm to understand it, they were not open before. And then you can see here, Jonathan, this is the other sort of original stained glass. And so here we are at the choir loft. There was at one time an actual pipe organ here in the space.
Yeah.
I believe actually we still have it in storage, we being Ken Falk's team. The mural that you see behind the stage was commissioned by one of our members, Catherine Wagner. And Catherine's an internationally recognized photographer and conceptual artist. She took this piece. This photograph was originally part of a diptych that she had. As Catherine likes to tell the story, she came in, she's known Ken for many years, and looked around and she said, "This place needs a woman." And so here is Helena looking down on us, and she is one of the few, if only, recognized female emperors in antiquity. She was Constantine's mother, credited for bringing Christianity across the world. And also she was credited to have found Jesus' cross, as the story goes. Regardless, we just love the sort of trompe-l'oeil optics that the mural gives the space. And again, it's an installation we just couldn't imagine not having here at the church. Jonathan, I'm going to let you walk up the stairs and see our really beautiful room. Okay. You'll get to see also some of the original rose-colored stained glass, which is really special. Okay, go.
Don't want to pull it too hard. Don't want the bell to fall through the ceiling.
It won't. It's quite secure. So, and this is our apothecary. Boulie is this really, really special line of candles and scents, soaps and toothpaste and combs and just about anything and everything you would need to feel wonderful and luxurious, including scented matches that you'd use to light your candle. It was started by a French-Moroccan couple. They're lovely, and Ken had been placing their products in a project in Provence for many, many years, and then just actually, emailed him out of the blue, and an incredible friendship was struck, and now we're the only brick and mortar store for Booley in the United States. So we feel really fortunate to be able to represent the line.
Hello, my name is Vahid Setari. I'm a structural engineer, and I was fortunate to be asked to help with this wonderful project.
I'm Rick Feldman. I'm one of the architects from Page and Turnbull who worked on this project.
And transept is the
where,
path that goes
like
across.
from that rose window to this rose window.
And this is a Romanesque church. It's laid out as a cross. So nave makes the long part of the cross and transept makes the cross portion. So most Roman Catholic churches are designed this way. Maybe I should start by saying that what we see here is the result of approximately 15 years of working on this building. When I first got involved with the project, I was told that there were a number of prior structural studies, evaluations that had determined the building was needed some seismic strengthening. With that notion in my mind, I walked into this building and took a first look at that. At that point, building was almost abandoned. This is circa 2005. Building was abandoned. It was in a very bad state of disrepair. There were leaks through the roof, and there were signs that some of the steel framing supporting the ceiling, they were rusting and falling apart. The project for us started with a two-phase project started for us with a phase one that involved seismic evaluation and strengthening of the building. We researched the original. At the front of the building, there are two large bell towers. Those bell towers were rebuilt from inside out. Bell towers have a steel skeleton with brick infill. Layers of brick were peeled off, and we replaced that with concrete with additional piling to firmly secure them to the ground. At the other end, with transept, we have several cross walls. We added 4 concrete shear walls to strengthen the transept area. Between these two, we have a roof system that consists of steel trusses, and the roof was reinforced with cross bracing. So in effect, we have a building that has 2 strong points, and the nave is bridging over those 2. Of course, one of the challenges with any of these projects is to reconcile the archaic construction of the building, use of unreinforced masonry that is not recognized by current codes, with the seismic safety requirements that we want to maintain. And that required a little bit of a creative engineering at times. Here we are looking at one of the interesting structural features that was added for seismic strengthening of the building. The altar, the wall at the backside of the altar is about 130 foot tall, 40 foot wide, unreinforced masonry, and it was not safe to have such a tall wall without any reinforcement. So a network of steel strong backs was added behind it, and they were tied to the shear walls inside the building. Before this design came to fruition, we had some discussion with the architects about whether it would be better to have the strong backs on the inside and try to hide them, or on the outside, which would be exposed. And finally it was decided to leave them outside. And then architects came up with a creative solution to cover this wall up with this network of wires and ivy growing on them, because they had found some historic pictures that showed ivy was originally growing on this wall. So the addition of the steel strong backs to this wall provided the opportunity to restore that original shape and feature of the back of the building. Looking at the tower, The intent of the structural strengthening was to maintain the original building shape and configuration, including the configuration of all the windows. So as you can see, even though the towers were mostly rebuilt from inside, we tried very hard to keep all the openings, windows as they were originally. The cupolas at the top were mostly maintained. We strengthened them from inside and repaired. There was a lot of deterioration and wood rot up there because of its open structure. But after repairing those things, most of it was maintained as it is.
Is that real gold leaf gilding?
It is real
It
gold
is
leaf.
real gold leaf, yeah. Our friend Scott had samples of this gold leaf that had come from Italy.
Yeah. Literally, well, and putting the gold leaf on, you know, where it doesn't seem that windy down here, but when you're up there and you're holding gold leaf, which is about almost the, you know, weight of air itself,
Yeah.
it's quite tricky to
And they had to
navigate it, and they
brush them.
basically had
They had
to
brush them over.
build a little tent for them to put the gold leaf on.
The mechanical air handlers and some of the equipments that are needed to support this space were brought in, and they wanted to install them in the building, but there was no space that you could put them except behind this rotunda. So we had to build a small platform that they could lift the equipment from up here, and then inside that rotunda, on the backside of rotunda, we had to modify the framing that holds the plaster to make room for the mechanical air handlers.
The heating is all done with radiant tubing, so there's radiant throughout the floor, and that's how they heat the building. It really doesn't need much cooling, but there is a very effective ventilation system.
One of the main requirements was that per National Park Service requirements, any addition to the original building had to be completely independent and reversible. In other words, at some future point, if they decide to remove this mezzanine, it should not have any impact on the original building. So that required that the mezzanine have its own structural system. It needed its own columns and beams and supports and lateral framing, lateral resistance. All of that had to be independent of the main building. To do this, the first decision that we made was that to hide the columns that support the mezzanine behind the original building columns. That way, when you look at this, except for the portion of the mezzanine that is in the transept, most of the columns are hidden behind the original building columns, so they are not that noticeable. The second decision was that there has to be a seismic separation, or what we call seismic gap, between the mezzanine and the building walls, so that in the event of an earthquake, when both building and mezzanine are moving independently, they don't collide each other. So when you go on top of the mezzanine, you look around the edges, you see that there is this physical gap, which also serves as an architectural definition to highlight where the mezzanine is located.
I support that.
Is it a real horse trough?
It is
It is.
from France.
So the original design concept for the towers were that to reinforce them as two strong box elements that hold the end of the building securely in place. To do that, the brick walls here were peeled off and concrete they were rebuilt by concrete. At the mid-height, there used to be a wood floor. So we replaced that wood floor with a new concrete floor that acted like a diaphragm, holding this box together. Once Ken Folk got involved with the project, he came here and he looked at this space and said that this space called for open space filled with light. And he asked us to look into the option of replacing that floor. After some discussion, we decided to replace that with this steel cross bracing that you can see. During the daytime, because of this new introduction, this space is really light, full of light, and gives a feeling of openness.
One of the things that, of course, architects spend a lot of time in a historic building is the restoration of the windows. And there was a challenge with these windows in that the archdiocese had removed the stained glass windows that were originally in all of these openings, leaving the framework that held the stained glass, and the window behind it wasn't really meant to be a window in and of itself, but was just a protective layer for the stained glass. And really, it was the contractor who came up with the solution of building a new window that matched the armature of the original stained glass window, and also working closely with SHPO, who agreed to let us replace the protective glass, which was not clear, with clear glass because people were going to be on the mezzanine, allowed us to create the solution, which we think works very well, of having clear glass that expresses the original armature and in a way that is very functional but still very respective of the original building.
John, you're on mute. There you are.
I'm going to ask our speakers to enable their video and sound, and we're going to jump right into a question and answer panel discussion. So I just wanted to welcome everybody. Maybe before we dive into the questions, I wanted to, I'll cancel my spotlight video here. I wanted to hear from each of the panelists here what your role in the project was, your name, and where you're from. So we'll start with Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Jackson. I work at Ken Folk, and I had the great pleasure of getting to lead the effort on our end, working with both Page and Turnbull, ourselves as one of the owners, and then the contractor and all the other consultants involved. And then I'd like to mention as well Brittany Baquet, who was sort of, we were like the dynamic duo on this one from Ken Folk World. She was not able to be here because she's relocated down to New Orleans, but you know, her participation and mine were just as strong and worthwhile.
Great, thank you. And Ruth?
Hi, I'm Ruth Todd with Page and Turnbull, and I was the principal in charge of this project. We worked on this project since, I think, 2007. When the building was on the market for a couple of real estate developers who were looking at the project. And one of the first things that we did was historic resources evaluation to determine the significance of the church. And from there, when the building was purchased by one of the current owners, we became the preservation architect and then the architect of record for the rehabilitation of the project. And we negotiated historic preservation tax credits.
Great. And I know everybody has already met Vahid, but maybe you can briefly introduce yourself again for everybody.
Hello.
Yes.
Do you have my picture? Hi, my name is Vahid Setari. I'm a structural engineer. I worked on the project from the first phase for seismic strengthening, and during the second phase, I was fortunate to work with Ruth and her organization to do the interior developments in the project.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Chris and I will be moderating questions from the audience. We have one question that came in that I think we can start with. Would you like me to take that, Chris? Okay, I have permission. So the question is from Betsy, and I know Amy and Elizabeth were answering via text, so you can look at those answers there. But maybe we can kind of go into the possibilities of what would have happened if the church had not, if somebody had not come along and saved it or repurposed it. What do you think would have been the church's fate?
I can take that, if that's
okay.
Helpful. So I think, per the work that Ruth and team did previously, the whole scheme was meant to be another tech office. So I think we're ultimately really thrilled that it's turned into both an entertainment space, an arts organization, and something that is both public as well as privately facing. And then getting to be part of our organization, kind of giving us a stage to really kind of play out all of the opportunities that we do. We do a lot of entertaining as part of our business. So this church is incredible for that. And I think we feel really blessed that we've gotten to give it truly a new lease on life.
I had a question to follow that up, Elizabeth, or if anyone else wants to answer. Can you describe just the condition of what it looked like? I heard it was in terrible shape when you first came across it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you guys did see some imagery of what the condition was during that video. I do recall that my first visit, when this was sort of being revealed that it was gonna be something I was gonna get to work on, I mean, literally decaying plaster, tents from previous inhabitants that had been sort of breaking into the church to live there. There was needles, cigarettes. I mean, it was disgusting, bird poop, everything. And I think it was Amy who might have even said that this used to be sort of an underground like dance rave party venue as well. So, you know, a lot of graffiti, it was a complete and utter transformation from what we started to where we ended up. It was like how long was our construction process? 2 years thereabouts? We were kind of doing it as a design build, fixing and sorting out issues as they came up, coordinating closely with the Page and Turnbull team as well as Vahid and all of the other stuff. So totally new lease on life. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is that it has helped to transform a neighborhood that has never felt very safe, and that just its rehabilitation has started to change the behavior of a few blocks around St. Joseph's. And the fact that, it's a very problematic building type to reuse for new uses. And this is just kind of the perfect use for a former church.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So you saw it as a catalyst to the entire neighborhood by preserving this one building that you sort of see a ripple effect throughout the neighborhood. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like in terms of investment in the whole neighborhood, did you see that rise?
I can't really talk about that. Maybe Elizabeth or I don't know if
Amy's
available.
Amy probably has more of sort of the day-to-day to share in that regard than I do. But I do know that we've been part of sort of the larger community, creating a community benefit district and whatnot as well. So a huge part of that has been community outreach and cleanup, and then giving, as Ruth mentioned, kind of creating a beacon in the neighborhood for sort of positive change as opposed to sort of neglect. Another great thing is we've had Presidio Knowles School as a neighbor. So there's been a lot of collaboration and work between our organization and the school to sort of spearhead that sort of safety measures within the neighborhood as well. And, within the community benefit district and all of that. So we're trying to incorporate not just art within our building, but, art in sort of the greater landscape of the city as well.
Yeah, and I think that there had been a lot of concern that, people were going to reinvest in this building and then people were going to come and graffiti and tag it, almost immediately. And that really hasn't happened. So I think that has changed behavior and changed the neighborhood. And then I should also say that this project didn't just receive historic tax credits, it received new market tax credits. So it's one of the few projects that have coupled preservation with new market tax credits. And that's been a sort of a model for other projects.
Maybe I'll ask a question now. I think there were some things not covered in the video, and I think Vahid was saying earlier we should talk about the sort of political process and the planning process that was involved in making this happen. And maybe Ruth can start with that. Is how do you get buy-in from both your representatives, but also the general public in the neighborhood? How do you get people to really support a project like this? And did you encounter any hurdles along the way?
I can't really talk too much about the public participation and the community support, except that the owners and the attorneys that helped to shepherd the approvals process were very proactive and strategic about making sure that people knew about the project well in advance. They hosted community meetings. We had to go through the entitlements process in San Francisco, which is often pretty lengthy. We were a little bit nervous about going before the Historic Preservation Commission, had to do all the packages and the submittals for that. And it actually gained unanimous approval from the Historic Preservation Commission, which is not always the case. And so the entitlements process, while it took a good while, actually went very well. And I think it was because people were so excited about this abandoned church having a new use and being able to, really improve the neighborhood that we were just very lucky that it got positive support. We didn't get initial positive support from the Park Service with the tax credit applications. The California SHPO was very open to the idea of inserting the mezzanine to help with the occupancy level of the building, and we went back and forth with them for a while, but proving that it was a reversible element and did meet the Secretary of the Interior standards helped with the negotiations on the tax credits at the state level. But when it got to the Washington Park Service reviewers, they rejected our Part 2 application and were going to deny us the tax credits. So we actually had to fly to Washington and convince them through case studies and through, a very detailed standards analysis that it was a standards compliant project, and we were able to convince them that the mezzanine was not a disruptive feature and did qualify for tax credits. So we were very proud of that.
And very quickly, Ruth, to follow on that question, I'm very curious if the project would have happened if you didn't have either the new markets or the tax rehab credit. Would it still have gotten off the ground without those?
From a financial feasibility standpoint, I do not think so. And I don't know if Elizabeth wants to talk a little bit more about it, but this building was originally permitted, we said, as an office building with one or two owners of the property. And then later on, there became three owners of the property to help make it all work. So the developers and the ownership structure changed over the years. And I do think that bringing in Ken Falk as an owner and an occupant really raised the bar on the final outcome. And then it was also very helpful that one of the other owners was the general contractor on the project. And so I think that really helped figure out the budgets and the schedules and the synchronization that really did need to happen, especially regarding the financial packaging and the bank approvals.
Yeah, I can say sort of to that effect, I think because of our really close collaboration and, oddly treating this more like a design build where we were making decisions in the field and, doing drawings, based on what was coming up. I think we were able to operate in a very lean way. And because we had a direct relationship with the contractor as well, we were able to make smart decisions financially, even in terms of sort of, VE things that came up. I would also say, sort of to that note, like the wide flange columns that we ended up using for the mezzanine structure, we ended up originally, I think there was a different, more institutional building style structure. And when we had it rendered, and I actually shared it with my husband, who's also trained as an architect, we kind of discussed internally, and then I brought information back to the meeting the next day, and we completely changed the structural scheme from tube column to a wide flange beam or wide flange column. And Vahid was able to not only design it and sort of come up with really smart solutions quickly, but we ended up saving money. So I think because we were sort of facile in the way that we worked, we were able to achieve more, both in terms of schedule and budget. And then ultimately what we were able to do even beyond that with all sort of our interior furnishings and our art program and our other things that are really enlivening and truly making the space magical.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to not go any further without thanking John for putting together that really cool video. That is one of actually our first virtual tours that we've posted here at CPF. So thanks, John, especially that amazing drone footage. It was great. I wanted to just ask a couple of questions because I'm very interested in this, the financing. You know, I know that church buildings are notoriously hard to reuse, as you know, because they're so big, and it's just really hard to find a secondary purpose for a building that is so specific like that. So I'm wondering, Amy, I see Amy's back too. If you and Elizabeth could talk a little bit about what is actually going on in that building. How did you figure out a use that was financially would bring you return for a structure like that?
Yeah, there's sort of, I think the beauty of it is that there are a lot of uses and certain sort of parts of our programming can expand and contract as sort of what our needs are and the needs of our community. So I briefly spoke about it during that tour. And again, yeah, Jonathan, thank you. What a lovely document to St. Joseph's. That was really great to see. But we have our members, and so we have and our membership structure. You know, we started in September of 2018, so we're going through some evolutions and some changes, and we'll be announcing those early next year. But we do have a membership program where people can pay sort of an annual membership fee, and they get sort of unfettered access to the space. So you can come in and have a glass of wine with 2 people. You can have your daughter's bat mitzvah there for 450 people. You know, we really make that happen for you. So that's sort of one sort of income avenue, and also sort of holds a whole host of programming that we do that's specific just for our members. And then we also function as an event space, as a venue. And so we have an events department that works to, you know, whether it's a corporate buyout or a private event from weddings and on down. That's another sort of, again, program that can, expand and contract as needed. And then we also, as we sort of grow and our arts programming grows and our foundation, our nonprofit organization grows, we'll be able to sort of bring in, grants and different forms of funding that will support the programming as it grows.
Great. I have a question from Amber, and maybe this will help all of us. I don't understand them completely myself, but Amber's asking if somebody could briefly explain what the new markets tax credits are.
I don't know. Elizabeth, do you know? I know.
I mean, I was going to actually kick it to you, but my understanding is there's a certain investment period. And then if you maintain ownership in rehab spaces, then a certain portion of that cost is essentially forgiven through tax credits.
That's the preservation tax credit.
All right, so it's good that I'm not taking this question.
And I don't know that much about new market tax credits, but it's about developing programs in particular neighborhoods that help with employing lower income community members. And so there are, just like the preservation tax credits have regulations, the new market tax credits have regulations about how you structure the deal and how I think how employment, how it's tied to employment and economic development in the the micro neighborhood. But maybe there's somebody in the audience that knows a lot more about it than me, because I don't think I'm describing it well enough.
Yeah, there's also a government website that's CDI fund.
Yeah, I just put it. Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Thank you.
So that was going to be my question. Is that a state or national? It looks like it's a national program.
It's a federal program. Yeah.
Federal, yeah. That looks amazing. I'm glad you introduced that to everybody, because I know a couple of places that could actually really use that right now.
Yeah, no, I think it just gives a bigger bang, because you get, double tax credits.
Mm-hmm. And then Salvador has also mentioned that the Mills Act in some California counties also gives tax credits in terms of property tax abatement, I believe. And then we had another question here. It was about parking. So I know it's an urban area, and so I saw that you answered in the chat. I think that was you, Elizabeth, saying that you don't have that much parking. But so have they loosened restrictions on terms of like you must have this many parking spaces for this size building? I think that they've in LA County there's been some it's a little more malleable now. So was that part of it? Like you didn't have to supply.
Yeah, I don't remember all those details, but we did provide bike parking, and there is adjacent transportation sort of off of Market Street with BART is walking distance, a couple other things.
Right, but I think there's also, I think there's flexible space, the flexible paving adjacent to the church that allows, kind of
right, but we're using
for the normal residents.
We're not really using that for public events. That's more for our,
right, but that's what helped met the parking requirements for the code.
Yeah. I had a question for Vahid, since he looks like he's ready for something. You'd mentioned in that video that the concrete floor was holding the space together. I think you were in the stairway when you were talking about that. Can you just explain a little bit more like the engineering of these different spaces? I know you talked about it in the video, but maybe just a little bit more on that. I'm going to have to, and you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, the reference that I made, the concrete floor, that was inside the bell tower. Bell tower was essentially like a very tall, slender box. It needed intermediate floors to hold this box from deforming. That's why we had originally included concrete floor, which naturally would block the light. And once it was decided to let more light in, we replaced that concrete floor with cross bracing, and that was inside both of the bell towers in front of the building. Now, what we used the bell towers was as two strong points to hold the front of the building. The next line of strengthening was in the transept that was almost at the other end of the building, and the roof was strengthened with cross bracing to bridge between these two strong points. So the whole church is basically held together with the front and with the shear walls in the transept and the roof that is holding all of them together. Naturally, there are circumstances that because of the need to preserve the original building structure, this is a historic building and we cannot go and wholesale change the infrastructure. There has to be flexibility in design, and we were fortunate that City of San Francisco Building Department was cooperating with us in coming up with these solutions that would not necessarily conform to the exact letter of the current code, but we were able to satisfy the intent of the code and provide the seismic safety standards that they were asking for.
Great. I have a question from a few people actually about the church's past life. As it just amazed me to hear the history of the church and its whole long life as eventually becoming the largest Filipino church, Catholic church in the world or the country. I forget the fact, but it was just stunning to hear that there was a community here that really made use of the church. And I'm curious if any of you have heard from any of the former parishioners or people who attended services in the church and what they think of the work that you've done here.
I can take that one just to start at least. I have to say we had a number of different people come through the fire department, and some of the captains who came to make sure that we were safe for events or whatever actually were parishioners from their childhood. So it was very much a full circle sort of not only people in the building department, but the fire department and other sort of government agencies in San Francisco kind of coming through and being part of sort of the reawakening of the church. It was really cool to get sort of individual anecdotes and people having sort of really beautiful memories, and then getting to kind of come back and seeing it in a completely new way.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to second what Elizabeth was saying. You know, people would just, you know, particularly in that first 6 months in the first year, would just sort of knock on the door and come in and say, you know, my parents were married here, or, you know, I had my first communion here. And it's really special that they, you know, at first we were a little trepidatious that they, you know, what they would think about the change. But I think everyone who we've talked to who has a history with the church was so happy to see it have a life again, that it wasn't this abandoned, you know, forgotten church on the corner, that it really had this, like, you know, that we had, you know, treated it really respectfully. And so all of those people are always welcome to come in and have a seat. I mean, maybe not right now, but one day they will always be welcome to come in and have a seat.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. While I have you as the focus, I was going to ask you, well, first I wanted to thank all of you for spending time with us today and for meeting John at the church to work on the tour. But I wanted to make sure everybody knows, I posted a link in the chat to our awesome auction that is one of our major fundraisers of the year. And John's going to share the screen. Amy, can you tell us a little bit about this event for 6 people? Could I just bring 5 friends and we have a fun reception, or what is the detail on this?
Unmute myself. Yeah, you know, this is something that I think is as representative as we can, you know, during the time of the pandemic. But these sorts of tours were something that we would do on a regular basis, on a daily basis, really. You know, like, as I mentioned before, we have a membership program. We do have these private events, but we also are a nonprofit organization, and we really do want to open the doors to our community and to the people around us. And so this tour, you know, we would, I would be able to lead you guys through the space and give more detail about the specific artwork that's there, sort of specific programs that we have coming up, really let you have that experience. The pictures and the video are amazing, but you really have to be in the space to feel the sort of scale and the depth of the church itself. It really is a special experience. And so, yeah, we would just absolutely love to offer, you know, a socially distant moment in the church with some delicious wine at the end.
Thank you.
Great.
I'm also going to add to that. After ringing the church bell, I feel like my luck has improved over the last couple of days. So I think whoever gets a private tour will have their chance to have some luck as well, right?
I hope so. I certainly do. Yeah.
So we also have a bunch of other options for you at the auction page. So if anybody in attendance today wants to take a look, just go to californiapreservation.org/auction. There's everything from experiences to tickets to mushroom hunting if you're into that. So I just wanted to maybe close by thanking all of our tour guides today and everybody who was involved in this project. It was such an impressive project, and I really appreciate your time today. Does anybody have any words of closing for us?
Well, I can ask Amy, where can people find out more information? Do you want to just say your website, or do you have any an Instagram that people can check out?
Yeah, we definitely have Instagram. St. Joseph's Art Society is just our handle, very straightforward. And then I also put in the chat that I put my email address. You're more than welcome to contact me. We also have an info@St. Joseph's Art Society. You can also follow Ken Folk on Instagram, which is a great way to sort of find out what's happening and going on. But yeah, please be in touch. We would love to share St. Joseph's with more people.
Thank you. How about you, Ruth, for Page and Turnbull? Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can come to our website, www.page-turnbull.com, and hopefully we're going to get access to this recording so that we can post that on our website, because
Oh,
it was
yeah.
it was a nice way to explain the project. So thank you for doing that.
And
Okay.
Vahid, does Vahid have anything else to say? He always looks like you got something interesting to say, to add there, Vahid.
Nothing more to add. I'm really thankful for this introduction, for this tour that you provided, for the wonderful job that John did with the video and aerial photography and giving us a chance to present this project. I hope more people can come and see and enjoy this space. And I hope to see more of these kind of projects that revitalize and bring back to life these historic buildings. That's my passion.
Thank you so much. Those are great closing words. And I want to thank everybody again, Elizabeth, Ruth, Amy, and Vahid for joining us today. We also would just ask you, if you have a chance, to go to californiapreservation.org/donate if you're so inclined. We are doing our fundraising for the end of the year, and we appreciate all of your gifts because it helps us put on these kind of programs and send John out to the field to do the video, and also make these free for the public so we can share them with everyone. Do you want to wrap it up, John?
Sure. And the only thing I'll add is that I've pasted a link into the chat box that allows people to leave feedback about today. We'd like to hear your thoughts, and we are deep in the planning phase for next year's program. So we'd like to hear what you'd like to see in our program. So we're looking forward to next year, and we're looking forward to being out there in person instead of socially distanced at some point. So thank you all again for your time. I'm going to stop my video and keep the webinar open for people to leave feedback through that chat box. But thank you all again.